This is Chapter 2, Part B. Let me talk to you about it. If you can look in your book, every page that I'm referring to, this is your 5th edition book of the Tony Gaddis book. Look at page 44. Look at that variable. There is variable 1. If you look at page 43, my apology, on variables and literals, if you can please look at example co-listing 2-7, which is the variable. And in that variable, it talks to you about value. 5 is assigned to value, and value is an int. So when you actually do value is, it's going to actually print. If you notice, it's going to print out the value for the thing. So what's a variable? A variable in Java must be declared before it's being used. It's just like C++. So if you notice that int value, that value has to be declared before you can access that with it. So make sure you declare it before you can use. Look at the variable in the second one on variable2.java on page 44. Look at that. So you can actually declare it, and that's declaring it as int value, semicolon, in line 7. However, when you look at line 9, 5 is assigned to value. Remember that in programming, the right side equals the left side. So 5 is put in the memory of value, and that's being what's called initialized. It does the same thing. You can actually output that. So both those statements are equivalent in both those programs that you see in variable 1 or variable.java and variable 2 with it. Alright, so I'd like for you to know that make sure you declare it. I'm going to ask it on the exam some way, somehow with it. The other way, excuse me, that I'm going to ask you is make sure you be able to do some ASCII values. So I'm going to look at that table that you look at table 2-2 on page 42. I'm going to ask you what's the output. I'm going to give you sample outputs for it as well. So look, for example, sample output 2.8 on page 43. You might see something very like that, very similar with it. Or example 2.7, something like that. It's very, very similar that you could see with it as well. So make sure you understand those ASCII tables and those things with it as well. Okay. What's a literal is the next part I need to talk to you about. A literal is by definition it's like a constant. You're putting in a constant that's in programming we call it a literal. So it's different from what's called you define as a final. Alright? So you initialize something that you declare as a literal with this thing. So 5 is stored in the memory of value. That's a literal. Alright? So a particular string in quotation is a literal. Okay? So notice that it's in a quotation, including the space as well, excuse me, with this thing. So there's also in Java, instead of the insertion in C++, you use what's called, this plus sign is called the concatenator or concatenation operator with this thing. So you can add strings, one string literal with another one. So in this case, if you see this, you're going to see hello space plus the word world. And then it's going to go into the next line. It's going to say the value is colon space 5, and then it's going to come down and so on with this thing. So make sure you understand what is concatenation and what it means with it as well. I'm going to ask you what this definition is on the exam. Make sure you understand that. The other piece about concatenation definition with it as well. I'm going to have several of these things, sample these things. Make sure you understand how it works with it as well. I want to ask you about rules of your identifiers. Make sure you know what identifiers are. So if you know it from 1436 for me, what are they? They're basically functions, variables, and methods. Here I call classes variables and method. In addition, it's a little different. It's constants. Back then is when I talked to you about in C++. Here it's classes, variables, and methods. All right. Methods is also known as a synonym as functions with it as well. Identifiers may not be any of the Java reserved words. So if you have, what are the reserved words? They're data type words such as int, double, long. You can't use that as a variable. You can't have int. It doesn't work like that. So they're reserved words. You can't touch those words as an identifier with it as well. Okay. Key things I want to make sure you understand is make sure you know how to name an identifier with this thing. So identifiers, look, that has to be, identifier may only contain A through Z, alpha, uppercase, lowercase, digits, 029 underscore or the $sign. Okay, here in Java you can use a $sign or underscore. So I could give you something like, for example, I could ask you something with can an identifier start with a number? No, you can't. Can an identifier start out with an underscore with it? No, you can't. You don't want to do that. Good identifiers, you need to start the first character may not be a digit. Identifiers are case sensitive. Identifiers cannot include space. Alright, so make sure you understand how to name an identifier with this thing. These are reserved words. I'd like for you to know this. Be familiar with this thing. Take this thing and write it up a few times. I'm not going to ask you to regurgitate it or repeat back to me. The way how I would ask you is which one of the following is not a reserved word. So you have to be able to pick it up from the list which one is or not. So take this list. I always like to learn the way how I learn is kinesthetic. I always like to write it out about 2-3 times. So I'm familiar with this thing. You don't have to memorize it. You just have to be familiar with this list with it as well. So make sure you know this slide with it as well. Variable names. Alright. So you got to be able to know what are, which one of the following cannot be used as an identifier. You got that down, right? So it can't be reserved words. In Java, it is standard to practice when you practice capitalization on the first letter. Like I said, in that simple.class or simple.java, that uppercase S or hello world is uppercase with it. So when you have a public class and the name of that class, that first letter needs to be uppercase with it. Alright, so a little bit more. This should be review for you. This is a double data type assigning to a TR. This is the type of a double is 8 bytes. Sales tax. The reason why do we have different types of data types is what? Precision. Precision. Okay, make sure you understand that. So rounding off is my point with it as well. Java naming convention. So make sure you go through and name the proper convention with this thing with it. So just read through this thing. There are 8 primitive data types. I would like for you to know this. I would like for you to know this. I'm going to ask you. The question I'm going to ask you is which of the following is not a primitive data type? Again, you got to know byte, short, int, long. All of these data types are listed in your book. I'd like for you to know the size of the data type that's in there with it as well. So if you look on page 50, a byte is one byte, short is 2 bytes, int is 4 bytes, long is 8 bytes, and a float is 4 bytes, and a double is 8 bytes. A boolean is 1 byte, and a char is 1 byte. So make sure you understand to know what type of size they are. Again, it goes back to memory management is what they're saying. And this is what this lists. I don't care about this third column. I need for you to know the second column, the size right here with it as well. The right column, this column, you can always look up and the details with it. So just data types variable. How do you declare it? Very similar to C++, the data type and the identifier with a semicolon with this thing.